Please raise your hand if you have a question. Yes.
If elected, would you make impeachment of President Trump a priority?
Sorry, what did you say?
If elected, would you make impeachment of President Trump a priority?
Right. I would only vote to impeach Trump if there is evidence such as if he went right now, he left the White House, he wants to go shoplift currently. I understand that people in this area generally aren't very supportive of Trump. There are things I agree with Trump, like for example, efforts towards peace between North and South Korea. As a Korean American, I'm glad that it's a positive step. Now, I probably wouldn't honestly want to have beers with Trump, but that's also, in my opinion, his predecessor, Obama. I didn't agree with many of Obama's policies, but I would love to get a beer with Mr. Obama because he seems a very personal guy. And a lot of people, I think we have an issue where people were so divided and so tribal, where people just do blind followership. And I tell my other Republican counterparts, like, you need to support Trump when you're elected. And I said, well, it depends on the issues. And at the end of the day, we have the Constitution for a reason, right? And no branch, judicial, legislative, executive, should try to support another branch. That's why we have checks and balances. And I learned to think objectively, and I'm not afraid to speak my opinion and stand up for what's right. While it's very important that we support all Republicans or Democrats, it's very important that we are able to think freely as individual citizens and do what's best for everyday Americans in this district. Thank you.
Yeah, I will not make the president's impeachment a priority. Except if the Mueller report, when it finally comes out next year, if it actually documents something that is an impeachable offense, for example, laundering Russian money, then okay, we reconsider it. But I think the principle, which Jerry Nadler, who's the ranking Democrat on Judiciary, would be the chair of the Judiciary Committee next year, has said, is that impeachment should not be partisan. We shouldn't have a Democratic House impeaching a Republican president, or a Republican House impeaching a Democratic president. If impeachment is going to move forward, it has to be bipartisan. It has to be Democrats and Republicans together saying, this person is no longer fit to serve. We haven't seen that yet. There's very little about this president that I respect or like. I disagree with him. The occasional peace with North Korea would be great, and I'm glad we have an updated NAFTA. But in general, I've been opposed to most of the things that he's been pushed forward. But I still also respect the electorate, the Electoral College, and a process that works for all of us. So no, unless something comes up. By the way, one of the first maxims I learned in politics is that an attack unanswered is an attack agreed to. So for just one sentence, there's nothing wrong with Dominion power. I have not taken any money from Dominion Energy, but rather the Dominion Energy employees, through their political action committee, have supported me since I was running for lieutenant governor and governor. By the way, the largest single activist for climate change in the state is Dominion Energy. They own the largest solar plant in the state. They're building tons more. They have all the nuclear power plants, which obviously are carbon-free. And they've just done the very first offshore Atlantic wind farm application with the U.S. government. They're the largest wind farm that we'll have on the East Coast. So we're not going to get to a carbon-free future without partnering with Dominion.
Questions?
How do you feel about funding for Metro?
We're going back and forth. I'm for it. So where we are right now, first of all, we have the new general manager, Paul Wiedefeld, who's been there now 3 years. This is very good, really big step forward. Let me break it into two pieces. There's the operations piece, and then there's the investment, the long piece. In the operations piece, we've been $300 million short, $250 last year, $300 million this year. Happily, Maryland, under McAuliffe and then North's leadership, Maryland or Virginia, and then Hogan, Maryland, and DC, have all come up with significant amounts of money. There's a little debate here. So the Virginia money has come from the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which nobody really likes. But there's a lot more money coming. We are set the stage now for a federal investment in the operating budget. There's a bill, widely bipartisan bill, that Jerry Connolly and Anthony Brown are the lead sponsors on original co-sponsor, that will do that. Part two is we very clearly will push forward with the $150 million a year from Congress that's matched by the 3 jurisdictions Jim Moran, Tom Davis, Frank Wolf got that for the first 10 years. We're in year 9 right now. But we will reauthorize that almost certainly in the spring, but we're going to bump it from 150 to 175 or $200 million a year. But then the big thing is we need an infrastructure bill. We have $4 trillion, according to the Society of American Engineers, in backlog infrastructure in America. It's 170,000 bridges. And both Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders all said they were for an infrastructure bill, but no one's yet come forward with a concrete plan for a stable, long-term revenue stream that would fund this. And I think that will be our, if Democrats take the House back, that will be our first responsibility to get that done. And that then gives you the second tunnel crossing at Roslyn, extends to the blue line, the silver line, the yellow line.
I agree with Mr. Beyer on funding for the metro, and I would support federal funding for the metro. And why I say this is actually, because DC is a very unique area. As a Republican, you can't say that we want to, cut spending at a Pentagon or cut a bunch of government programs, because our economy here locally depends on it. And federal investment for the metro area is actually an investment for our nation's capital, our federal infrastructure. It allows federal employees, our military personnel, federal civilians to commute to work and back. And I think we all can agree that the metro is horrendous. And when we commute, I'm sure we can all relate to that. The metro is closing down. You're late to work. This is the first. When I first left the military, I was surprised when my coworkers were like, "Yeah, don't worry if you're late because the metro is going to be closed down." And I said, "That's really weird." And another thing is the metro is really expensive as well, and that's the issue. And we didn't make sure the metro is affordable. When I lived in Kingstown, I realized that if I was to park at the garage or even park for free at Springfield and Metro 4 stops, I believe from Franconia to Crystal City area, it would cost me more than just paying for about $350 a month to park in Crystal City and drive. And that sounds absurd, right? Especially, that's public transportation. It needs to be more cost efficient. And an issue is we have continuing short-term solutions, just like we see with politicians. You don't think about the long term. For example, when you build on top, it's cheap and fast, but then in the long term, because it's exposed to weather and rain, it causes more maintenance issues. And also with the unions, I understand it's very important to have a union to make sure that employees are treated properly, but that creates a rise in metro prices. And I think the solution to make metro affordable for everybody is to kind of partner with local businesses, kind of like what we see with Tyson's Corner actually, where the metro has retail available. And that's why Tyson's Corner Mall is the only area that's not dying retail-wise, if you think about it. When you look at areas like Tokyo, for example, or even Korea, they actually have metro businesses inside the metro, which makes things affordable.
Thank you. All right.
More questions? Yes, sir.
I'm a moderate voter, and I didn't vote for either of the candidates for presidential election because I thought they were both fundamentally flawed. And I hear a lot about politicians wanting to work together, but when push comes to shove, it always comes down to party lines. Give me an example or an issue where you put people over politics and people over party.
Thank you for asking that great question. And it's related back to Dominion Energy. Actually, over 70% of Dominion Energy's outputs is carbon related, so it's not like you're driving Teslas around. Actually, Don Myer said the Dominion PAC money. I'm the only candidate, federal candidate in the 8th Congressional District that doesn't accept any money from corporate interests, because I want to represent individual citizens. I don't want to be that typical politicians that's always bought by PACs. And there's good PACs too, like veteran PACs, and they mean well, but I want to set example and a hard line, and no means no, and that's why I only take contributions from individual citizens like you. As for example, I was the first Republican to join alongside Activate Virginia, which is actually an all-Democrat green organization. If you look at it, Activate Virginia, it's just me right there as a Republican. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of backlash from my conservative Republican base, but I say, hey, we're so polarized here, and this is an issue. This is my step. I'm also the only person here in this room at the federal level that didn't agreed to not take fossil fuel money, the fossil fuel money pledge. That's typically a Democrat or left-leaning group, right? But I'm totally fine with that because I came into politics because we need to do what's best for the American people. Third example is I'm a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. I'm a Republican. And I was on the phone with the NRA actually, just literally today, and I said, if you go on my website right, or NRA.com, it has a question mark. And I said, hey, why do I have a bunch of question marks? They're like, well, you're a gun sense candidate, but you answered some things that we don't like. For example, I believe in criminal background checks, and I'm all for universal concealed carry reciprocity, but I think that's only possible with a database system, because how else would I, if I was pulled over in California, be able to prove that with concealed carry, for example? And the NRA did not like that. But then I said, that's the most swampiest thing ever. Here I am talking to both sides, of the aisle, and actually trying to do something positive.
Well, thank you for your question. And I actually disagree with the premise of your question, that it's all very partisan and a party line vote. If you take the time to look over the last 4 years of votes, the ones that I know about, I would say 95% of them pass on largely huge bipartisan consensus. I think we passed 400 bills in this Congress in the House that we sent to the Senate, with votes where the positive votes were more than 400 out of 435.
We have to talk about major issues. I mean, certain spending issues and certain
No,
things
no,
everyone agrees on.
These are really important. Many of these are really major.
Can I have what's an
issues.
example?
Well, for example, the whole cybersecurity bill, all the spending
Everyone
bills.
agrees on
cybersecurity. And let me also move on. Where there typically tend to be party line votes, abortion, guns, federal regulation, they're not based on party line, they're based on values. And people are bringing different values to the game. And by the way, I can say proudly that I am a pro-choice Democrat, but we have anti-choice, pro-life Democrats in the thing. And they are not beat up by their leadership to vote the party line. On guns, I want a lot more common sense gun measures than the NRA wants. But again, our leadership doesn't say you have to vote with us. We tend to vote that way because that's who we are. And we move forward. Two examples for me though. I'm a pro-trade Democrat, free trade Democrat. There weren't a lot of us. There were 28 of the 194 that voted to give Barack Obama and Donald Trump trade promotion authority. One example. Another example is there were only, I think, 30 of us that voted against the Syria resolution, which would require the head of the FBI and the head of DNI, Director of National Intelligence, to certify any Syrian refugee to be 100% without risk to come to the country, which meant no Syrian refugees. That was an easy political bill. Most Democrats, most Republicans voted for it. I thought it was the wrong thing to do anyway.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, this could be for both of you, but I really want to talk to candidate O about this. First on his list in the pamphlet, and that is the $21 trillion debt, which I believe is the biggest threat to this country, especially in terms of the long term. The current governance model and the way our representatives act, they favor the short-term gratification of federal spending without a sustainable plan for fiscal solvency. That not only affects all the generations in this room, but my kids as well. How will you combat that way of thinking and become more innovative in the way that you govern and try to become more efficient so that we can get out of this debt and produce good results for my kids and beyond?
I think you asked the hardest question tonight, because it is an enormous problem, and it's one that we've made no progress on in years and years and years. I am first a Virginia political leader, and we balance every budget. And I'm a Virginia Democrat, and we've always balanced every budget. But the dilemma is right now that we tend to try to balance the budget by looking at the discretionary domestic spending, which is less than 15%. It's down to 13% of the total budget. Whereas 75% of the budget is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt, which is going way up. We unfortunately have, and I say it's one of the things that I used to admire about Republicans, that they had the mantle of fiscal conservatism, which they've thrown completely away in the last 15 years. And this last tax bill, which is the largest legislative deficit in American history, is going to add close to $3 trillion to that $21 trillion that you had. A place to start, and this is not a 2-minute answer. I can give you a 2-hour answer. The place to start, though, is with a bill called Social Security 2100 that fixes that piece of the entitlement problem through the end of the century, so that your generation, millennials, will actually have Social Security. You go to John Larson's website from Connecticut or my website, you can read all about Social Security 2100. We also have to do the same kind of thing for Medicare and Medicaid, and then we'll be well on our way to fixing these $1 trillion deficits that we have every year. by the way, one more quick short thing if I have, not yet.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Historically, throughout American history, our federal revenues have been 20 to 21% of our total GDP. They're now down to 15%. It may feel like we're being taxed pretty heavily, but the amount of money that we're contributing to the federal budget deficit as a percentage of our income has never been lower. And when you're spending at 20, 21%, and you're only bringing in money at 15%, I've been running a business for a long, long time. It just doesn't work. So we're going to have to fix that too.
Well, thank you for bringing up the debt. The debt is like my number one thing, so that's why it's on the top. I think we could first start by not being bought by a corporate interest. My opponent, he actually voted in support. I'm all about having a strong national defense, and there's better ways to do it, to the $1.3 trillion F-35 program. And guess who's been giving them a lot of money? Lockheed Martin. So you have to look at what people are doing. People want good intentions, but they get dirty by money. And that's why it's always good to not take money, because then you're influenced. How are you going to talk about taking down the debt when you take money from the companies and then vote for to increase the debt by $1.3 trillion? That's a huge issue. And I think, honestly, that we can have strong national defense by being more transparent on what we're spending money on. For example, all these chairs right here, if the government bought for it right now, they probably paid $500 each. And you think it's like both sales should be cheap, right? But we need more transparency what's going on. And I want to introduce a bill, and here's a solution that I want to bring in tackling the debt. Every year, and if you guys are on federal programs, you guys know, come June, you're like, spend the money, spend the money, spend the money, or we're not going to get the money back next year. I'm sure a lot of this, I worked on as a federal contractor and I was in the military. Well, why don't we introduce a bill where if you have excess money, right, let's say $100 million in a program, you turn that money back in, and how to incentivize people. We just make it like in the private industry. You reward everyone on the federal program, not just civilians, also contractors. You get a bonus. Good job. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I don't know how many people are, but on a program. But $2 million is now given to everyone as a bonus. Like, you did a great job, and that changes the cultural perspective. And now with $98 million left over, why don't you spend $50 million of that, to pay off the debt, and maybe $48 million to actually have things that we really need for, like the metro, because we know that the government spends money for things that they don't even need. And I'm sure we can all relate to that if you were ever in the military or you work on a federal program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question. Yes, sir.
The immigration issue is obviously very contentious. Could each of you give me your thoughts on individuals entering the country illegally, whether you support sanctuary cities, and also your thoughts on whether ICE should be abolished?
I don't believe ICE should be abolished as a federal agency, and I think the whole immigration issue is used as a political tool, same thing as what happened with Kavanaugh. If you're a victim of sexual assault, you should be treated properly and not be used as a tool to leverage a political gain. I honestly believe I speak for immigrants and recent immigrants, families of recent immigrants. And if you notice, a lot of politicians who talk about immigration aren't really from a recent immigrant background history. First group is people who come here legally and they know exactly what the process is, fill out the form. Second group is people who honestly just don't know. Maybe it's a language barrier, or they don't even know the USCIS exists. My parents lived here for over 30 years, and I still help them with English all the time, so I get it. But if you give them a form, they'll gladly fill it. The third group of people who are immigrants are people who intentionally know what's going on, and they're doing it illegally. And those are radical groups like the drug cartels or whatnot. Do I think we should close the doors? No, absolutely not. But we need to help people. But it's also established rule of law. And here's the real issue too. How explain the need to, and I'm sure we should all think about it. My family came here to pursue the American dream. They all paid their dues and whatnot. But how is it fair for someone else to not go through the same process? I think that's another issue to college loans too, right? People have college debt. Well, if we do complete student loan forgiveness, how is it fair for everyone else who paid all their student loans off, maybe even worked overtime, worked 2 jobs? So that's where it comes down to about the issue of immigration. Thank you.
No, I don't think we should abolish ICE, although it's desperate need of reform. The ICE that we have under Donald Trump is very different from the ICE we had under Barack Obama or George W. Bush. These are people who are arresting people in churches and in hospital emergency rooms and in adoption agencies. I've talked to the battered women's shelters in Arlington, Alexandria Falls Church. We've seen a dramatic drop-off and people coming there because they're afraid that they will be arrested, or their husbands or boyfriends will be arrested. On the sanctuary cities, that's one of those fake issues. There are no sanctuary cities in Virginia. It's not an issue here whatsoever. On Dreamers, I think it's one of the great failures of our government so far. Congress refused to deal with the Dreamers, which is, it's 800, 900,000 kids who have been raised in the United States. There are many of them here. I think George Mason University has more Dreamer kids than any college in America. Nova has an enormous number. Mount Vernon, just a few blocks away, or Marymount rather, has a bunch. These are kids who are as American as your kids or my kids. They just haven't been born and brought to this country when they were 1, 2, 3 years old. So that will be our first priority, is fixing the Dreamers. I'm also very concerned about the TPS people that came from Haiti, from El Salvador. I see it firsthand at our Land Rover dealership. I've got 3 El Salvadorans who fled the violence there under temporary protective status, been there 10, 12 years each. They're integral parts of this business. Raised families here, American children, American wives, and yet they would be deported if we don't fix the TPS. Finally, if you think long term, I think the best political leaders are always when they're thinking out 10, 20, 30 years. Our birth rate is really, really low. If we're gonna, and you cannot grow an economy unless the population is growing at a steady, predictable rate, we need immigrants to do it. And yes, to the extent possible, we want to do it through legal immigration, but we also need to respect the many millions of people that are here that are integral parts of our economy right now.
Yes, in the back.
Hey, I have a question for both of you about immigration issues, because I am an American citizen from Cuba. Came here legally with visa legal worker as a pastor, and I'm very disappointed with the point of view that you are expressing here. Because Virginia, for the people here that you don't know, is a real plantation. When you keep people here that they cannot vote, but they can work. And you know what? I cannot apply in any place where they are working. Any place, because they don't hire me. And you know what? I have been in 20 places trying to find a job here, and people from El Salvador have been saying to me in my face, oh, you are not qualified. And I say, buddy, I was in your country working as a volunteer for 1 year. And you say to me that I cannot qualify to become a front desk? But he and anyone that supports what Don Beyer is saying, and with all the respect that I have for you, it is wrong. You know why it's wrong? Because the thing it is that here in Virginia, you have a surplus in the economy. You have a surplus in the economy for undocumented workers, paying money for you, and at the end, you are not helping anybody, because the Arlington Employment Center have even white people will sue an employer. You are supposed to take seriously that situation.
Please ask a question, sir.
Well, my question is, how can you change that? How are you afraid to say to undocumented worker, you need to find a way to go back to your country, or you know what? You are supposed to become legal and fight for legally and citizenship of these people, but go serious in that, because they are not supposed to be working here with TPS. TPS, it is not to work.
I'm not sure I understood all that, but I do know, I just look at our little family business, and about 320 employees, and 2/3 were born overseas. Many of them were first here illegally and were given amnesty in the Reagan amnesty in '86, and have gone on to raise families, send kids off to UVA and Virginia Tech, and have done really, really well. The Cuban immigrant problem has always been a little differently because of the wet foot, dry foot, and we've been taking virtually any Cuban who can put their foot on American soil automatically has status here and has the right to stay and to work. And every employer I know that there are people that drive by to get people to do pickup work, goes through a rigorous I-9 process. We don't hire people that aren't here legally. And so the perspective of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable and most of those corporations are that we need to find a way to allow the people that are here without papers so that they can work legally, and that cleans up the problem that you're talking about. Because then you're not competing against somebody that can be underpaid, that can be essentially enslaved, or you pay them $4 an hour or $5 an hour because they can't report it, and then no taxes are paid. We want them to be full members of this economy and tax-paying members, and it works in that sense. By the way, one other small correction to Thomas's thing. I don't receive any corporate contributions because that's illegal. Members of people who work for businesses give money through corporate political action committees, just as they do through labor unions, or if they do through the Sierra Club or many other things. But corporations are not funding anybody's campaigns.
Well, it's going to be very technical. It's corporate PAC money. If you go on FEC.gov, you can see like Lockheed Martin CEO, directors, Dominion Energy. So it's not just like everyday working Americans who just work at Lockheed Martin or just work at Dominion Energy. So, you know, do your research. You know, it's all there in the comparison chart. But thank you for raising the point. It's exactly what we're talking about for, you know, Americans who are dreamers and immigrants. Like, we try to work hard, and you don't see this at the, you know, Don's right. You don't see this at the big companies because, you know, that issue is almost non-existent. But smaller businesses, like your waiting tables, small companies, it does happen. People get paid cash under the table, and I definitely understand that. I'm a 1.5 generation. I'm like Korean here and American here. I understand both sides. And I see it happening all the time. And I think one way we could, you know, do something to actually fix that is, you know, figure out how we can process work visas. You know, if you were to apply for a work visa right now, people would have to wait months, 6 months, 4 months. It's unacceptable, right? Imagine it's worse than you applying for a security clearance almost, right? For trying to get a job. So sometimes people, like, you know, just a social phenomenon, people just feel like, well, my visa's taking too long, I'm just going to work under the table and get underpaid. And not only it hurts that person, you know, without a work visa, it also hurts an American citizen or an immigrant with a work visa. Because now the immigrant with a work visa is not able to compete with the immigrant who doesn't have the papers. And I think we need a more cooperation, honestly, with ICE. I think my opponent paints a bad picture of ICE. These are people who actually stepped up and willing to die for citizens of this country. I think there's no civil way to do it. I think if ICE was to come by and just do an anonymous check and say, hey, everyone here, please show me your documentation, and that will remedy it. Now, some people think that's an invasion of privacy, but that's what we were talking about. If that was the situation, we do have penalties. If you're an illegal immigrant and you're working, it's $20,000 fine. But, you know, risk versus reward, that's the issue. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
One quick one. So, recent research shows, we're on the topic of immigration, that dual language immersion programs are one of the #1 ways for us to integrate immigrants into our communities. Here in Arlington, our superintendent, Dr. Patrick Murphy, has made a decision recently that will shrink the size of our dual language immersion program, which I find saddening, but I'd like to hear if you have any ideas about what you think are the best ways to integrate immigrants into our community.
Number one, they need to feel welcome. And I would support, you know, not shrinking the dual immersion. I think I'm on Fairfax County products. I think you're talking about like ESOL, English as a Second Language.
No, that's absolutely not the same thing.
Okay.
So this is dual language where they're learning from each other. So it's 50% English, native English speakers, 50% native Spanish speakers, or whatever language it might be.
Okay, well, I'm a Fairfax County product.
No, but that's a common misperception.
But I think that's wonderful actually, because then you change, you know, people's paradigm. You know, you learn somewhat. Because a lot of people, you know, honestly, people, it's in human nature when we're not familiar with something, they feel uncomfortable. But I think, once again, immigrants need to feel welcome. When they go to school, they can't be treated differently. But you also have to look at, you know, the social aspect too. You know, I say, and I'm a Korean American, I'm very proud, you know, to be a Korean American. But some people say, well, why don't you just say you're American? And I said, well, honestly, like, I would like to be seen as American. I will, you know, I hope that my son or my grandson, they don't even have anything. People don't see race at all. But in reality, there is an issue with it. You know, people get treated differently, and we need to stop that. And we need to have the moral courage to stand up or say something like that too. And also, you know, from, you know, I guess the Korean American side, from a family of immigrants, is it also depends on the people. Some people come here and their parents, you know, work their arm and leg off, 2 jobs to get a visa over here, and their children don't want to learn English. They want to just eat, whether it's Korean food and hang out with the local Koreans. And some people are different. They were like, hey, I want to try every American restaurant here. I want to learn about American history. And some people are like me, where they understand both sides. So that's the cultural paradigm, and we see it all the time, and over time it changes up, it's dispersed, we're 1.5 to third generation. But we still see that too, you know, if you go to New York City, you have Little Italy, you have Chinatown, but I think we work as a whole and not be divided as a nation, and just see everyone as Americans.
Thank you.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear that they're strengthening the program, but I think you have the chairman of the school board here tonight, so you can ask her too. But you know, I remember growing up, they always said that, you know, she's really smart, she knows 3 languages. And now we've discovered that she knows 3 languages, therefore that's made her really smart. That the learning the language actually expands your thinking abilities in so many different ways. We did that with our kids. In fact, my youngest, who was in Switzerland with us for 4 years, picked up German, Italian, French, and whenever we go out, she wants to speak German the whole time, so they don't know what we're talking about, and it works really well. On the larger issue of how do we integrate all these new Americans in our economy, first of all, Thomas is a great example. The Korean American who's running for office. There need to be a lot more people like that. Virginia did a great job last year. Our first Latina woman, first Asian American. We have a Muslim down in Roanoke who serves in the Virginia General Assembly. You look at the people that are running for the U.S. Congress right now, at least on the Democratic side, it's incredibly diverse. And every time I have a chance to speak to one of the many subsets of new Americans, whether they're Korean American or Muslim Americans or Latinos, etc., my plea is please get involved in the community. Join the Chamber of Commerce, join the Civic Federation, run for office, show up at the farmers markets, you know, be, as Thomas suggested, embrace your Americanism. And I already see it in the family business. You know, I mentioned 2/3. Well, one of the cool parts is everybody falls in love with everybody else. That you really see the melting pot work in the American workplace, and that's a really hopeful thing. This, by the way, is what makes us strongest. Those cities that are the most diverse, like Washington, D.C., are the ones that have the greatest vitality, the greatest energy, the greatest growth. And the ones that are the least diverse are the worst.
I think we have time for one more question for these candidates, if there is one.
Right over there.
Yes.
I just wondered, you mentioned Social Security, when you said research a bill. I just wondered if both of you could say what 3 or 4 changes you recommend and you would vote for to change in Social Security.
Okay, so I have 2 minutes, so let me give you a quick overview of the Social Security bill. Because right now, I don't remember when it runs out, 33, 35. I do know that no millennial believes it will be there for them, or at least that's the way they answer the surveys. So what John Larson's bill does, and it's, by the way, it is bipartisan, there are a number of Republican co-sponsors, and I'm on it. Does a number of things. The first thing it does is it raises the Social Security payment for the people at the bottom end. Because if you're a minimum wage worker, you don't have enough Social Security payments at retirement to even get a bump. No deal once they get a bump. Second thing is it puts an automatic COLA in there based on the cost of living for senior citizens, which is more than what you're getting right now, so that it keeps up. We had this weird thing this last year where the Social Security increase was less than the increase in the deductibles for medicines. So almost everybody took a step back if you were over 65 and retired. The third thing it does is it takes, right now the rate is 6.2%. It takes it up by 0.05% per year. So 6.25 to 6.3. So it goes from 6.2 to 7.2 over a 20-year period of time.